The flower is still on his hands when the bell above the door rings. Felix Carter does not look up right away. He never does. 5 years of mornings behind this counter have trained him to finish what he is doing first, to press the crease into the parchment paper, slide the pastry into the display case, breathe once before he gives the room his face. It started as a habit. Somewhere along the way it became a form of protection he could not give back even if he wanted to. He closes the display case. He straightens up. He looks at the door. Theo North is standing at the entrance of the bakery. He is wearing the charcoal coat, the expensive one with the single button at the collar, and he is already looking at his phone. He never looks at the room when he enters it. He moves with the ease of a man who has already decided, ahead of time, what every space in the world is going to give him. Felix has noticed this quality across 18 months of 7 a.m. mornings. He has noticed it the way you notice something you keep returning to without meaning to, not because it brings comfort, but because the pull is stronger than the decision not to follow it. Hi viewers, have you ever had to face someone every single day who turned your entire life inside out? Smile at them like everything is fine and they don't even know your name. Drop it in the comments right now. I want to hear every word. Morning, Felix says. His voice comes out level. It always comes out level. He spent a long time becoming good at this, at holding his face still and his voice steady, and the whole of his interior life behind something that looks from the outside like calm. He is proud of it. He is also, on mornings like this one, quietly devastated by it. Theo looks up. His eyes move across Felix's face for exactly 2 seconds, brief, courteous, giving nothing, and then drop to the menu board on the exposed brick wall above the counter. Large Americano, he says. No sugar, got it. Felix turns to the espresso machine before his expression can do anything it isn't supposed to. His hands work on memory. Grind, tamp, pull. He has made this exact order 43 times. He stopped counting at 43 because the number had started to feel like a record, like something a person keeps when they're building a case against themselves. The morning crowd is thickening around the edges of the room. A woman in a yellow parka is laughing at something on her phone near the window table. A retired man, Felix recognizes from most weekday mornings, is folding his newspaper in half with the careful deliberateness of someone who values the ritual. 2 students from DePaul have taken the corner booth for the 3rd morning in a row, laptops open, cups going cold in front of them. The bakery smells like brown butter and cardamom, and the specific warmth of a room that has been filled with people long enough to hold their heat. Felix built this place from nothing. Every tile he chose himself. Every light fixture, every shelf of mismatched ceramic mugs, every small chalkboard above each pastry that describes it in exactly 3 words, because he ran out of patience for longer descriptions. He built it the way a person builds something when they need a reason to stay in one city, in one life, in one version of themselves, with a quiet urgency that other people sometimes call passion, and that Felix knows was closer to necessity. Theo does not know this. Theo does not know anything about Felix Carter, because to Theo North, Felix Carter is the man behind the counter on North Halsted Street in Lincoln Park who makes a very good Americano and does not make small talk. That is the entire story as far as Theo is concerned. 18 months of morning orders and contactless payments and nothing more. Felix sets the cup on the counter. Theo reaches for it without making eye contact. He slides his card across the marble surface. Felix runs it. The machine prints the receipt. Theo wraps his hand around the cup and turns toward the door. He stops. Felix watches him stop. He has seen this before, Theo pausing at the door the way a person pauses when a word escapes them mid-sentence. Usually he checks his phone once more and walks out. Today he doesn't. Today he turns around fully and looks at Felix with an expression that is difficult to read and impossible to dismiss. Have we met before? Theo asks. Somewhere other than here. It is not a pickup line. It is not casual conversation. It is a genuine question from a man who does not ask genuine questions unless he needs the answer. Felix keeps his face completely still. He has practiced this specific stillness. He knows exactly what it costs. You come in every morning, Felix says. Monday through Friday except the week of Thanksgiving, you always order the same thing. Theo holds his gaze. 1 second, 2, 3. The question moves across his face like weather, present, and then slowly clearing. His expression settles back into that smooth, unreadable composure that seems to be his default setting for everything that doesn't require an immediate decision. Right, he says. He walks out. The bell rings. The door swings closed behind him. Felix does not move for a moment. He stands behind the counter with his hands flat on the marble and he breathes. The woman in the yellow parka is still laughing. The retired man is still folding his newspaper. The DePaul students are still on their laptops. Everything in the room is exactly as it was 30 seconds ago, which is one of the stranger mercies of ordinary mornings. They do not stop for the things happening inside them. Felix picks up a cloth and wipes down the counter. He thinks, for one unguarded second, about a night 6 years ago. About a balcony above a city that felt enormous and very cold. About a man who had held his hand in the dark without being asked to and without making it into anything it didn't need to be. He shuts that thought down before it can finish forming. He is practiced at that too, then he hears it, small feet on tile. Fast, light, purposeful. Dad. Luca appears in the doorway between the front of the bakery and the kitchen. He is 5 years old. He has flour on his left cheek, and a look on his face that is at least 3 times more serious than anything a 5-year-old has the right to carry. He is wearing a small grey shirt with the sleeves pushed up, and he is looking at Felix with eyes that belong entirely to another man, not similar eyes. Not eyes that bring another man to mind. Theo North's exact eyes. The same dark brown that goes almost black near the pupil. The same heaviness in the upper lid. The same quality of steady, measuring attention, like the room is already understood, and what remains is simply deciding what to do about it. Felix looks at his son looks back at him. Calibrate the last chocolate chip muffin, Luca says. Felix breathes out slowly. Again, I told him to wait. I know you did, baby. Luca tilts his head just slightly, just a degree or two to the left, and Felix's chest pulls in 2 directions at once, because that is exactly the angle Theo's head had moved when he was standing at the door forming his question. You okay, Dad? Luca asks, 5 years old and already asking that question. Already watching for the answer that doesn't get said out loud, Felix crosses the kitchen. He kneels in front of his son. He straightens the collar of the small grey shirt. He looks at the flour on Luca's cheek and decides, as he always decides, to leave it. Good, Felix says. Go get your brothers, we've got another batch to start. Luca holds his gaze for one more careful beat. Then he turns and runs back toward the kitchen and the sound of his brothers, and Felix stands in the empty doorway and looks at the front door of his bakery. The door Theo walked through this morning, the door he will walk through again tomorrow, and every morning after that. The question is still in the room, hanging in the space where Theo had been standing, quiet and persistent and nowhere near finished. Have we met before? Felix picks up his cloth and goes back to work. He comes in on Wednesday with someone. Felix clocks this before Theo reaches the counter, a tall man in a black puffer jacket who is already talking when they push through the door, his hands moving, mid-sentence about something that involves numbers and a timeline. A colleague. Someone from Theo's world who moves through rooms the same way Theo does, like the room is a resource to be utilized rather than a place to exist inside of. Felix has met this type before. He grew up around this type and then briefly and disastrously he was adjacent to this type. He knows exactly how much space they take up without realizing it. Americanos, Felix asks before Theo reaches the counter. Theo looks up from his phone. Something moves in his eyes, something small and fast that might be surprise. Or might be recognition of a different kind. Just the one, he says. He's a tea person. Have green, chamomile and a house blend, Felix says to the man in the jacket. The man squints at the board like it has personally inconvenienced him. House blend, what does that mean? It changes every week, Felix says. This week it's hibiscus and ginger. That sounds like something my aunt would make. Your aunt has good taste, Felix says. You want it or not? The man looks at him for a second and then almost smiles. Yeah, I'll take it, Felix works. Behind him, the conversation between Theo and his colleague picks back up. Merger, board vote, someone named Hartley who is apparently a problem. The language of a life that Felix has never been part of and was only ever close to once briefly, through a door that was never supposed to be opened to him. He sets both cups on the counter. Theo reaches for his Americano without looking at Felix. He passes the tea across without breaking his sentence. Felix runs the card. The machine prints. The colleague picks up his cup, turns, and looks around the bakery with the slow, evaluating scan of a man who prices things without being asked. This your place? He asks Felix. Yes. Man nods once, slowly, like he's adding it to a ledger. Cozy, little tight on space, though. Felix opens his mouth. It seats 32, Theo says. He does not look up from his phone when he says it. His voice is flat and factual and carries no particular weight. He says it the way you correct a number that has been stated wrong automatically without ceremony. Felix goes completely still. The colleague shrugs and picks up his cup. They move toward the door, already back in their conversation, already somewhere else. The bell rings, the door closes. And Felix stands behind his counter in a bakery that seats 32, that he has never mentioned to Theo, that Theo has apparently at some point looked at and counted and filed. Felix stares at the door for a moment. Then he picks up a cloth and wipes the counter. He wipes it twice. He does not need to wipe it twice. 32. Theo North knows this bakery seats 32. Which means Theo North has, at some point across 18 months of morning orders and 2-second eye contact and no sugar, looked at this room. Really looked at it. The way Felix looks at things, precisely, quietly, building a picture no one asked him to build. The morning moves forward the way mornings do. A line forms. Felix makes drinks and bags pastries and makes change and says have a good one, and means it for most of the people he says it to. He does not think about the number 32 again until after the lunch rush, when the bakery has gone quiet, and the afternoon light is coming through the front window at that low golden angle that makes everything look more significant than it is. He sits at his small desk in the back office, and opens his accounts spreadsheet and stares at a column of numbers that need to be updated, and does not update them for 9 full minutes. He is thinking about what it means that Theo knows. Whether knowing how many seats a room holds is the same as seeing the room. Whether a man can spend 18 months somewhere and notice a detail like that without it meaning something, he decides he does not have enough information to draw a conclusion. His phone buzzes. A text from Deja, his neighbor 3 floors up who picks up the boys from Franklin Elementary on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when Felix can't close in time. Heads up. Marcus had a situation at recess. He's fine, nobody's hurt, but his teacher said he walked up to a bigger kid who was messing with Caleb and just stood there staring at him until the kid left. She said it was, quote, unsettling. Felix reads this twice. Then he puts the phone down, looks at the ceiling and exhales through his nose. Marcus. His youngest by 4 minutes. The quietest of the 3 by a distance that sometimes makes Felix genuinely worried and then, moments like this one, deeply, privately relieved. Marcus does not raise his voice. He does not argue. He positions himself in a room the way a fact positions itself in a conversation, without announcement, without apology, and with a kind of weight that is difficult to ignore. He's had this quality since he was old enough to pull himself upright in his crib and simply stand there, looking at whoever had entered the room, measuring them. Felix texts back, I'll talk to him. Thank you. He closes the spreadsheet. He grabs his jacket off the hook behind the door. He stands in the office for just a second longer than he needs to, in the room that smells like flour and espresso, and the very specific life he built out of something that was never supposed to last. He thinks about the morning, about Theo's voice, flat and factual, it seats 32. About the 3 seconds Theo had held his gaze on Tuesday and the question that had not quite found its answer. Felix turns off the office light. He goes to get his boys, but the whole drive to school, one thought sits at the back of his mind, quiet and persistent. A man who has been paying attention for 18 months is not a man who will forget a question he hasn't answered yet. And Theo North had asked a question on Tuesday morning that Felix did not actually answer. He deflected it. Smoothly, professionally, without a single crack, he had said, you come in every morning, as if that were the answer. It was not the answer. On Saturday morning, Luca rearranges the pastry tongs. Felix is at the espresso machine with his back to the display case, working through the first wave of the morning rush, when he hears the soft click of metal on metal. He turns around. Luca is standing on the small step stool Felix keeps behind the counter for exactly this, for the mornings when all 3 boys are in the bakery before their grandmother arrives to take them for the weekend, and he has moved every pair of tongs so they are aligned at the same angle, handles out, evenly spaced, with the same geometric precision that someone might use to set a formal table. Felix looks at the tongs. He looks at his son. Did I ask you to do that? He says. They were crooked, Luca says. They were fine. They were crooked, Luca says again, with a patience that lands somewhere between 5 years old and 50. Felix turns back to the espresso machine because he does not know what his face is doing and he needs a moment before he lets Luca see it. The tongs, perfectly spaced, handles out at an angle. It is such a small thing. It is the kind of thing a child does when something in them needs order, when the inside of a room is something they can affect even when everything else isn't. Felix knows this quality. He has watched it across 18 months of morning visits and 3-second glances and no sugar. He has watched it in the way Theo North stacks his receipts, the way he positions his coffee cup to the right of his phone, the way he enters a room and instinctively catalogues it. His son is 5 years old and he is already doing the same thing. Felix does not say this out loud. He does not say it out loud because he has made a policy, across 5 years, of not narrating the ways his boys carry their father inside them. He sees it in Luca's eyes, in Marcus's stillness, in the way Caleb takes apart every complicated thing he can get his hands on just to put it back together in a way that makes more sense to him. He sees it and he keeps it behind his teeth because saying it gives it a shape and giving it a shape makes it real in a way he is not ready for. Saturdays are supposed to be safe. Theo does not come in on Saturdays. Felix checked this early 6 months into the man's routine and confirmed it across 4 consecutive Saturdays. Weekdays only, Monday through Friday. Saturdays, Felix is allowed to breathe differently. To let his boys be in the front of the bakery without engineering their proximity to the door. To exist without one eye on the entrance. This is what he is thinking when the bell above the door rings at 8:47 on a Saturday morning and Theo North walks in. Felix's hand stops on the portafilter. Theo is in different clothes, dark jeans, a dark green pullover, no tie, no charcoal coat. He looks like a version of himself that exists off the record, a version Felix has never seen before and was not prepared to see. He looks, for the first time in 18 months, like a person who has somewhere quiet to be. He looks around the room the way he never looks around the room on weekday mornings. He is not on his phone. He takes in the bakery, the full thing, the morning light, the tables, the display case, the small chalkboards, the mismatched mugs, and then his eyes find Felix behind the counter. Didn't know if you'd be open Saturdays, he says. 9 to 2, Felix says. His voice is steady. He is going to be fine. He is absolutely going to be fine. Theo moves toward the counter. And Felix realizes, at precisely the same moment, that Luca is no longer at the step stool behind the display case. Luca is standing at the far end of the counter, near the register, with a small basket of sugar packets in both hands that he was in the process of restocking. He is completely still. He is looking at Theo with the expression he wears when he encounters something new, not wariness, not friendliness, just that particular unhurried attention that takes its time before it decides anything. Theo reaches the counter. He is 3 feet from Luca, Theo says, noticing him. His voice drops naturally into the softer register people use with small children. You work here, Luca looks at him for a moment. My dad owns it, he says. Theo glances at Felix. Something crosses his face, a small recalibration, a new piece of information being filed. That's so, he says. What do you want? Luca asks. Felix makes a sound that is somewhere between a cough and the word Luca. Large Americano, Theo says, and there is something almost like amusement in his voice, quiet and contained. No sugar. Luca looks at the basket of sugar packets in his hands, then he looks up at Theo. Why no sugar, Luca? Felix says, with more control than he feels. It's okay, Theo says. He is still looking at Luca. There is something in his expression that Felix cannot name, something slower and more careful than amusement, something that has not decided yet what it is. I just don't like it, he tells Luca. Never have. Luca absorbs this information the way he absorbs most information, without commentary, without visible reaction, simply taking it in and storing it. He sets the sugar basket down on the counter, neatly, at the same angle as the tongs. Then he picks up the small ceramic cup Felix uses as the sample holder and places it precisely to the right of the register. "'Kay," Luca says. He looks at Theo one more time, one long level look, and then he turns and walks back toward the kitchen with the basket. Felix watches Theo watch Luca go, and what he sees on Theo's face is not something he knows how to manage. It is not recognition, not yet, but it is the expression of a man standing in a room that has just shifted by a degree too small for most people to feel, and he is feeling it. He is standing at the counter of a bakery on a Saturday morning with his hands at his sides, and he is looking at the doorway a 5-year-old just walked through, and something behind his eyes has gone very quiet. Large Americano, Felix says. Coming right up. Theo looks at him. He looks at Felix for 3 seconds longer than he has ever looked at him before on any morning of the past 18 months, and Felix holds his gaze and breathes and keeps his face still. Take your time, Theo says. It is 4 words. It should not mean anything. Felix turns to the espresso machine and does not let it mean anything, but his hands are not entirely steady, and that is new. That has not happened before. And somewhere in the kitchen, behind the wall, he can hear Luca moving quietly, putting things in their place, setting them at exact angles, and the sound of it stays with Felix the whole time his hands are working. 6 years ago, on a Friday night in October, Felix Carter stood outside the Harrington Grand Ballroom on Michigan Avenue in a rented blazer that was 2 sizes too large, and told himself this was a good idea. He had borrowed the blazer from a coworker. He had borrowed the nerve from somewhere he has not been able to locate since. He was 22 years old, he was working 3 jobs, and he had gotten this particular job, serving at the Harrington Foundation annual gala, because it paid almost double the going rate for a Friday night, and because he needed the money with the specific urgency of someone who has done the math and found it unforgiving. He was not supposed to be inside long enough for anything to happen. He was wrong about this. The ballroom was everything the outside of it promised, and then more. Crystal light falling from chandeliers that cost more than Felix earned in a year. Men in suits that fit like they had been measured to the breath. Women in dresses that moved like water. And underneath all of that, threaded through every conversation, every glance, every exchange at the bar, the particular current of an alpha-dominated room. Felix had grown up Omega in a world that had very clear ideas about what an Omega was supposed to look like, and where an Omega was supposed to be, and a foundation gala on Michigan Avenue was not it. He knew this. He kept to the edges, kept his head down, kept the tray level, kept moving. He was good at being invisible. He had been practicing since he was 17. He heard them around the second hour. A group of men near the bar, 4 of them alphas, all from the same firm whose name was printed on the event program, laughing at something in a way that drew a wide, cold circle around itself. He did not catch the whole thing. He caught enough. He caught his own name, spoken by someone who had seen him come in through the service entrance, and apparently decided that the best entertainment available on a Friday night was a fat Omega in an oversized blazer. He caught the word gift. He caught the word send him over. He caught the particular quality of laughter that belongs to people who have never once had to wonder whether a room was safe for them. And then a hand closed around his upper arm, light, not rough, but certain, and someone said quietly, "Don't react," and steered him through a side door and out onto a terrace that ran the full length of the building on the 30th floor, above the city and below the cold October sky. The hand let go. Felix turned around. Theo North was 29 years old and had just been made the youngest VP in his firm's history, which was information Felix did not have that night and would not have for years. What Felix had, standing on that terrace in an oversized blazer with the city below him and his pulse coming down from somewhere it should not have been, was the direct, uncomfortable experience of being looked at as if he were a person, not an Omega, not a punchline someone had decided to deliver. A person. I'm sorry about them, Theo said. You don't need to apologize for other people, Felix said. I know, Theo said. I'm doing it anyway. They stood on the terrace for a long time. The city was enormous below them, lights and bridges and the dark flat line of the lake at the edge of everything. They talked. Not about the gala, not about the firm, not about any of the things people at events like this talked about. They talked about the things you talk about when a room has fallen away, and there is only sky and cold air, and a person standing near enough that you can hear them think. Theo talked about the city, the way someone talks about a place they love, and have not decided whether to leave. Felix talked about baking, the way someone talks about the thing they do that makes the rest of the world make sense. They talked until the terrace got cold enough that Felix's borrowed blazer was doing nothing, and Theo shrugged off his coat without asking and set it around Felix's shoulders in a single, ordinary gesture that landed nowhere near ordinary. Felix left before dawn. He told himself it was the right thing to do. He told himself it was the only thing to do. He had written "thank you" on the hotel notepad on the nightstand, 2 words, which was nowhere near enough and also the most he had, and he had folded it once and left it on the pillow, and walked out into the early morning with his rented blazer under his arm and his heart doing something loud and inconvenient in his chest. He thought that was the end of the story. 8 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in December, Felix sat on the edge of his bathtub in his studio apartment in Wicker Park and looked at the pregnancy test in his hand. His vision had gone narrow at the edges, the way it does when something too large to process tries to enter all at once. 1 line meant not pregnant. The test in his hand did not have 1 line, it had 3. He sat on the edge of the bathtub for a very long time. He thought about the terrace. He thought about the coat. He thought about a man who had said "I'm sorry" about them and meant it. He thought about what it would mean to call. He thought about the group of men at the bar, and the word gift, and the quality of that laughter, and whether Theo had known about it before he stepped in or after, and whether it mattered. He decided it didn't matter. Because what mattered was this: he was 22 years old, he was Omega, he had gotten pregnant from a single night with a man he had no way to reach, and the world he lived in had very specific ideas about what happened next to people like him. He decided, sitting on the edge of that bathtub, that he was going to build something. Not react, not wait, not hope, build. He was going to build a life so solid and so self-made that by the time his children were old enough to ask questions, he would have a real answer to give them. He was going to be enough. He was going to be all of it. He put the test in the trash. He washed his hands. He called into his morning shift and said he was sick. Then he sat down at the small kitchen table in his studio apartment and started looking at commercial lease listings in Lincoln Park. He did not call Theo North. He told himself it was because he didn't have a number. He told himself it was because the man deserved not to be ambushed. He told himself it was because he was protecting his children from the particular, well-documented cruelty of being wanted conditionally. He did not tell himself the real reason, which was simpler and quieter and far more honest. He was terrified. He was completely and thoroughly terrified that Theo North would look at him, in daylight, in real life, without the terrace and the cold sky and the borrowed coat, and not see what he had seen that night. He was terrified that the version of himself Theo had held in the dark was the only version Theo would ever be able to want, so he left it. He left it, and he built his bakery, and he raised his boys, and he became the version of himself that didn't need things. Until 18 months ago, when Theo North walked through the front door on a Monday morning and ordered a large Americano with no sugar. The Tuesday it happens, Felix has no warning. He has no warning because there is no version of how it happens that he would have been able to prepare for. He has imagined this moment in the quiet of the bakery after closing, in the space between sleep and not sleep that always arrives around 2 in the morning when his mind decides to run things he'd rather not watch. He has imagined many versions of it. None of them go the way it goes. The morning starts normally. 7 a.m., first rush, brown butter and cardamom in the air, the usual crowd filling in around the edges of the room. Felix is behind the counter. Luca is on the step stool at the far end of the display case, reshelving the morning pastries because it is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays Luca has a half day at Franklin Elementary and Felix brings him in for the early hours before his grandmother picks him up at noon. This is an arrangement that has worked fine for 8 months. Luca is careful and quiet and takes the work seriously, which is more than Felix can say for some adults he has employed. At 7:12, Theo North comes through the door. Felix sees him before Luca does. He always does. There is a part of Felix that is tuned to Theo's entry the way old houses are tuned to weather before it arrives, before there is any visible evidence. Something in the structure already knows. He reaches for the grinder. He starts the order without being asked. He has a system. He has a whole life built around systems that create enough structure between himself and the thing that cannot be undone. Theo comes to the counter. He is on his phone this morning, half present in the way he is sometimes, the conversation he's having somewhere behind his eyes even as he moves through the room. He reaches the counter. He puts the phone in his coat pocket. He looks at Felix. Usual, he says. Already started, Felix says. Something that might be the very beginning of a smile crosses Theo's face. Felix does not look at it directly. He turns to the machine. He does not see Luca stand up from the step stool. He does not see Luca pick up the small ceramic plate he has been arranging and turn toward the register to put it back in its spot. He does not see Luca stop. He hears it. He hears it because the bakery has one of those particular Tuesday morning silences, the gap between the first rush and the second, the 15-minute window where the room goes briefly, graciously quiet, and in that silence he hears his son stop moving, which is its own sound, the sound of stillness arriving. Felix turns around. Luca is standing 3 feet from Theo North. He has the ceramic plate in both hands, held against his chest, and he is looking up at Theo with an expression that Felix has never seen on his son's face before. Not the measuring look, not the careful attention. Something else. Something that has no name yet because it is too new, because Luca is encountering it for the first time and has not developed a word for the particular experience of looking at a stranger and finding something familiar. Theo looks down at Luca. He does it the way adults do with children, a brief, kind acknowledgement, nothing more, and then he starts to look back at Felix. He does not look back at Felix, he looks at Luca again. He looks at Luca the way a person looks when something does not add up and they cannot immediately locate the error. Slowly, without moving. His eyes go from Luca's face to Luca's eyes, and something in Theo North goes completely, absolutely still. The room goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with the number of people in it. Luca tilts his head, just a degree, just the way Felix has seen Theo tilt his. Your eyes, Luca says, are like mine. He says it the way he says everything, simply, directly, with total confidence in the accuracy of the statement. He is not performing, he is not being cute. He is a 5-year-old who has looked at this man's face and identified a fact and named it. The way Luca names all facts, without decoration, without apology. Theo stares at him. Felix's hand knocks the small ceramic cup off the counter behind him. It hits the rubber mat and doesn't break. The sound is sharp and small in the quiet of the room. Theo does not look at Felix. He does not look away from Luca. He is looking at a child with dark brown eyes that go almost black near the pupil, with a slightly heavy upper lid, with that specific, steady quality of attention that Theo North has carried his entire life, and has never once seen reflected back at him from a face this small. The woman in the yellow parka looks over from her table. She sees a man staring at a child in a bakery. She looks away. Felix does not move. He is standing behind the counter with his hand still over the space where the cup was, and he is watching Theo North's face do something he has never seen Theo's face do before. It is not the smooth composure. It is not the unreadable professional calm. It is the expression of a person who has just walked through a door they did not know existed and is standing in a room that reorders everything they thought they understood about the floor plan. What's your name? Theo asks. His voice is careful. Controlled, but underneath it something is working very hard. Luca Carter, Luca says. Theo absorbs this. How old are you, Luca? 5. I'll be 6 in March. Theo's jaw moves once. He looks at Luca for 3 more seconds, then he looks at Felix. And Felix looks back at him, and there is nothing left, no system, no practice stillness, no 18 months of careful management. Nothing between them except the full, unobstructed truth of the thing Felix has been carrying since a December morning 6 years ago when he sat on the edge of a bathtub and decided to do this alone. Theo looks away first. He steps back from the counter. One step, then another. He does not say anything. He does not reach for his card. He does not pick up the coffee that Felix has set on the counter. He turns toward the door the way a man turns when he is making a decision with his body before his mind has caught up. The bell rings. The door closes. The bakery is exactly as it was. The woman in the yellow parka has gone back to her phone. The morning light is coming through the front window at that low Tuesday angle. The Americano is sitting on the counter, still hot, still dark, exactly the way he takes it. Luca looks at the door, then he looks at Felix. He forgot his coffee, Luca says. Felix looks at the cup on the counter. He looks at the door. He thinks about the expression on Theo North's face in the 3 seconds before he turned away, not anger, not disgust, not the cold indifference Felix has always secretly been most afraid of. Something rower than any of those things. Something that looked, from where Felix was standing, like a man realizing he has been living with a missing room in his house and has only now found the door. Yeah, Felix says. He did. He picks up the cup. He sets it behind the counter. He tells himself his hands are steady. They are not steady. Luca climbs back onto the step stool and picks up the ceramic plate and resumes his arrangement quietly at his own pace, completely composed. And Felix stands in the middle of his bakery that seats 32, in the city he chose and the life he built, and understands with total clarity that the door he has been standing with his back against for 6 years has just come open, and Theo North is on the other side of it, and there is no more holding it closed. Theo is already at the counter when Felix comes out of the kitchen on Thursday morning, and Felix stops walking for exactly 1 second before he makes himself continue. He had half expected Theo not to come back. He had spent Wednesday telling himself it was a reasonable expectation, that a man who had just encountered the first evidence of something that rearranged everything would need time before he walked back through the door that had handed him the evidence. Felix had spent Wednesday morning making espresso and watching the entrance and telling himself he was not watching the entrance. He had spent Wednesday afternoon sitting in the back office with the accounts spreadsheet open and not touching it. He had spent Wednesday evening helping Caleb with his reading homework and watching his middle son trace each word with one focused finger and thinking, this is the life. This right here. 3 boys and a bakery and a Tuesday that changed something. He had gone to bed at 11 and slept in pieces, and woken up at 5 with the particular alertness of someone whose body has decided, ahead of them, that today is going to require full attention. And now it is Thursday and Theo North is at the counter. He is not on his phone. He is standing with both hands on the marble surface, and he is looking at Felix the way you look at someone when you have been carrying a question since Tuesday and have not slept cleanly since and are done waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment for this conversation. Felix knows this. He has known it for 6 years. Morning, Felix says. Morning, Theo says. Felix goes to the espresso machine. His hands find the grinder the way they always do, by memory, by muscle, by the 5 years of repetition that have made this motion as automatic as breathing. You came back, Felix says. He does not know why he says it. It comes out before he can stop it. Wouldn't I? Theo says. Felix does not answer this. He starts the pull. The machine fills the space between them with noise that is, in this moment, enormously helpful. The morning crowd does its usual work around them, people coming and going, the bell above the door ringing its regular rhythm, the room filling with the smell of butter and ground coffee and cold air carried in from outside. Felix sets the Americano on the counter. He runs the card. He slides the receipt across the marble. Theo does not pick up the cup. What's his name? Theo says. Felix looks at him. Boy, Theo says. Tuesday, you told me his name was Luca. You asked him his name, Felix says. He told you himself. I know. Theo's voice is level. I'm asking you. There is a difference between those two things and they both know it. Luca telling Theo his name is a 5-year-old answering a direct question. Felix confirming it is something else. It is a door. It is both of them standing on opposite sides of it, aware of what is behind it, and Theo is asking Felix to open it from his side. His name is Luca, Felix says. Luca Jerome Carter. Theo absorbs this. He is very still in the way that people are still when they are doing significant internal work and have decided not to let any of it reach their face. You have more than one, Theo says. It is not a question. Felix looks at him for a moment. 3, he says. Theo's jaw moves. Once, he picks up the Americano. He holds it without drinking it, both hands around the cup, looking at the counter between them. Triplets, Felix says, because not saying it is its own kind of cruelty, and Felix has been carrying this alone for 6 years, and the weight of it has never once gotten lighter. Theo looks up at him. Their birthdays are March 14th, Felix says. Luca Jerome, Marcus Elliott, Caleb Dorian. They are 5 years old and they start kindergarten at Franklin Elementary at 7:50, which is why I'm here at 5:30 every morning. He says this the way he says the word count for a pastry order, clearly, completely, without decoration. And they are healthy and smart and they are mine. Everything about them is mine. I want you to understand that before anything else. Theo is looking at him with an expression that Felix has never seen on Theo's face in 18 months. It is not blank. It is not composed. It is the expression of a man who has just been handed something so heavy and so real that his body is still deciding how to hold it. Okay, Theo says, just that. Okay, Felix exhales. Okay. A family at the door, mother, father, 2 kids in school backpacks, pushes through and fills the room with noise and cold air and the ordinary forward motion of a Thursday morning. Felix turns to take their order. He works through the next 12 minutes with his full professional competence, every motion right, every smile landing where it's supposed to, every cup produced exactly as asked. When he turns back, Theo is still there. He has not moved from his spot at the counter. He has finished the Americano. He is looking at Felix with an expression that has settled into something quieter and more determined than anything that had been there before. I want to know them, Theo says. Felix looks at him across the width of the counter. He thinks about a balcony on the 30th floor above a city that felt enormous and cold. He thinks about a borrowed coat. He thinks about a thank you note on a hotel notepad. He thinks about sitting on the edge of a bathtub in December with a test in his hands and making the choice he made and living inside that choice every single day for 6 years, while raising 3 people who carry this man's eyes in their faces. He thinks about all of it in the space of one breath. That's not my decision to make alone, Felix says. Come back tomorrow, give me 1 day. Theo nods. He sets the empty cup down on the counter. He straightens up. He buttons his coat. He turns toward the door. He stops. He does not turn around this time. Why didn't you tell me? He asks, quiet, direct, not angry, just asking. Felix looks at his back for a moment. Because I was 22 years old, Felix says, and I was afraid you would look at me in the daylight and see something different than what you saw on that terrace. Room goes on around them. The family at the window table is arguing cheerfully about whether to split a croissant. The bell above the door rings for someone going out. Theo does not say anything for a long moment. I wouldn't have, he says, then he walks out. Felix stands at the counter for 3 full seconds after the door closes. 3 seconds in which he is not managing anything, not holding anything still, not performing any version of fine. 3 seconds in which he is just a man standing in a room, processing the specific and profound ache of hearing. 6 years too late, the thing you most needed to hear. Then he picks up the empty Americano cup, he washes it by hand, he goes back to work. But the whole rest of the morning he thinks about the word wouldn't, not didn't, wouldn't. The difference between a thing that did not happen and a thing that was never going to happen, and the 6 years of unnecessary weight Felix has been carrying because he never once stopped to ask which one it was. That evening he puts the boys to bed. He sits on the edge of Luca's bed while Luca asks him, with the directness that belongs entirely to a child who has not yet learned to filter, whether the man from the bakery is coming back. Felix looks at his son. He looks at those eyes. He says, I think he is. Luca considers this for a moment. He pulls his blanket up to his chin with both hands, neat and even, the way he does everything. Good, Luca says. He closes his eyes, and Felix sits in the dark of his son's room and turns tomorrow over in his hands like something he has not decided yet whether to be afraid of, and the city outside the window goes on doing exactly what it always does, which is moving forward without waiting for anyone to be ready. Felix does not wait behind the counter when Theo walks in on Friday morning. He comes out from behind it. He comes out from behind it the way you step out from behind a thing you have been using as a structure and a shield, and a very useful piece of architecture, and he does it before his body has the chance to change its mind. He pulls off his apron. He sets it on the counter. He tells his assistant, Renata, 24 years old, competent, asks very few questions, to cover the floor for 20 minutes. Renata looks at Theo in the doorway, looks at Felix, and nods with the efficiency of a person who understands significantly more than she has been told. Theo stops when he sees Felix come out. He adjusts. He was prepared for the counter between them, for the marble surface and the professional distance and the espresso machine as a thing to do with his hands. He was not prepared for Felix without any of that. Neither of them speaks for a moment. Felix tilts his head toward the corner table, the one near the window, the one that's been empty since 7 because the morning regulars have learned, over 18 months, not to take it between 7 and 7:30 on weekdays. Felix has never told anyone not to take it. The room simply organized itself around the variable. They sit. Felix puts both hands flat on the table in front of him. He has thought about this conversation for 6 years in the way you think about something you are certain will one day arrive and are never adequately ready for. He has rehearsed it in his head. He has had it in the dark at 2 in the morning when his mind runs things he'd rather not watch. He has had the quiet version, the angry version, the version where Theo is cruel and the version where he is cold and the version where he simply sits there and says nothing because there is nothing sufficient to say. He has never once rehearsed a version where they sit at a corner table in a room that smells like brown butter and cardamom, with the morning light coming through the window at that clean, direct Friday angle, and Theo North is looking at him like a man who is prepared to wait as long as it takes. I need you to understand something first, Felix says. Okay, Theo says. I am not angry at you, Felix says. I need you to hear that. Because everything I'm about to tell you could sound like anger, and it isn't. It's just the truth, and the truth is complicated, and it took me a long time to find the parts of it that belong to me and the parts that belong to the situation and the parts that I made worse by being afraid. Theo is looking at him steadily. He does not move. He does not speak. He is giving Felix the full room to say what needs to be said, and the generosity of that, the specific, practiced patience of someone who is making space instead of filling it, is enough to loosen something in Felix's chest that has been wound tight for 6 years. I found out 8 weeks after that night, Felix says. I was 22 and I was working 3 jobs and I was Omega in a world that had a lot to say about what that meant, and I sat on the edge of my bathtub in an apartment that cost me $1,100 a month that I couldn't actually afford, and I made a decision. He pauses. He looks at his hands on the table. I decided to do it alone, not because I thought you were a bad man, not because I thought you would be cruel about it. I decided to do it alone because I was 22 years old and I thought the version of me you had seen on that terrace, the version in the dark with the city below us when everything felt possible, I thought that was the only version you could want. And in the daylight, with a pregnancy and no money and a rented blazer from a coworker, I thought the real version of me would look like something you had accidentally gotten into and would need a way out of. He looks up at Theo. It was my fear, he says. That was entirely mine. I am not putting it on you. Theo is very still. Felix, he says. Not finished, Felix says. I need to finish. Theo closes his mouth. I raised them, Felix says. I built this place so I could be here when they needed me. I chose their names and their school and their pediatrician and their bedtime stories and every single thing about their lives, and I want you to know that it was not hard in the way that people assume it was hard. It was not miserable. I was not a martyr. I made a choice and I lived inside it, and the life I made is a good one. My boys are good. They are whole and they are loved, and they have never gone without a single thing that mattered. His voice stays level throughout this, clean and clear and careful, the way he has always been careful with the things that matter most. But they have grown up without knowing their father. And that part I do not have a clean way to account for. That part belongs to the fear I had at 22 that I should have done better with, and I have carried that for 6 years. He stops, the room goes on around them. Renata is making drinks at the counter. Someone near the door is laughing at something on their phone. The Friday morning crowd is doing exactly what it always does, which is exist in the ordinary, beautiful way of people who do not know they are inside a significant moment. Theo leans forward. He puts his hands on the table. Not reaching, not touching, just present, both hands on the surface, close to Felix's, the same posture Felix himself is in, and it makes them look from across the room like two people at a table discussing something that requires both of them to be fully there. I want to tell you something, Theo says. His voice has changed. It still has that quality of control, that measured cadence, but underneath it now there is something that has been stripped down to the basic material. That night I have thought about that night more times than I can account for. Not because I was looking for you, not because I knew what I had. He pauses. Because that terrace and that conversation and the way you talked about your bakery like it was the most real thing in the world you wanted, I have carried that for 6 years too. I did not know your last name, I did not have a way to find you, and I told myself it was one night and the city is large, and that was the end of it. He looks at Felix. I was wrong about that. I have been wrong about that every single morning I have walked in here and ordered coffee from a man I recognized somewhere underneath the recognition and told myself it was nothing. Felix stares at him. You knew, Felix says. It comes out barely above a steady volume. You recognized me. Right away, Theo says. Not consciously, but somewhere in the first month, somewhere in the routine of it, something kept returning, something familiar. And I told myself it was the coffee. His jaw tightens. It was not the coffee. Felix looks at this man across a corner table in the bakery he built out of necessity and love and the quiet stubbornness of someone who had decided to be enough, and he feels something move in him that does not have a clean name. Not anger, not relief, not grief, although there is grief in it. Something that is all of those things at once, the compressed 6-year weight of a decision he made alone and the simultaneous sharp understanding that he was not as alone in the carrying of it as he had believed. They look like you, Felix says. I know, Theo says, Luca especially. I know. Something crosses Theo's face, something quick and soft that he does not try to conceal. He told me his eyes were like mine. Does that, Felix says. He names things. He sees them and he names them. He's been doing it since he was 2 years old. Theo looks at him for a moment. What about the others? And Felix tells him. He tells him about Marcus, the silence and the stillness and the way he stood in the lunch yard and held his ground for Caleb without making a sound. He tells him about Caleb, the taking apart and rebuilding, the focused finger on each word, the quasi-stealing that is an act of pure joy rather than mischief. He tells him about the three of them in the morning in the kitchen, the arguments over cereal and the pajama foot races down the hallway, and the way all three of them pile onto Felix's bed at 6 a.m. on Saturdays, because Saturday is the day with no alarm, and they do not understand the concept of sleeping in. He talks for 11 minutes. He knows it is 11 minutes because the clock above the display case is visible from the corner table, and he watches it without meaning to, the way you watch a clock when you are aware that time is doing something significant. Theo listens. He does not interrupt. He does not look away. When Felix stops talking, there is a silence between them that is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of a room after something large has been said, not empty, not tense, just full of the thing that was just placed in it. I want to meet them, Theo says. All three of them on your terms, at your pace, whatever that looks like. I know you do, Felix says. Theo says. But Felix says. Just, they are 5 years old and they are mine. And before anything else, before anything between you and me gets a shape, they come first. They are always first. I understand that, Theo says. Do you? Felix asks, not accusing, genuinely asking. Theo looks at him steadily. I walked out of this bakery on Tuesday and I drove to my office and I sat in a parking garage on West Monroe for 40 minutes before I could go inside. I have not slept more than 3 hours in a night since then. And all I have been thinking about, not about what this means for me, not about the implications. Not about any of the things I am supposed to think about when something this large lands in my life. All I have been thinking about is 3 5-year-olds who do not know me and deserve to. He pauses. So yes, I understand that they come first, because as far as I'm concerned, they already do. Felix looks at him for a long, unguarded moment. He looks at Theo the way he has not allowed himself to look at Theo in 18 months, not quickly, not with managed distance, not with the espresso machine between them, but fully directly, the way you look at something when you have stopped protecting yourself from it. Okay, Felix says. Theo says, come to the bakery Saturday morning, Felix says. 9 o'clock, I'll have them here. Theo nods. He starts to say something. He stops. He tries again. What it's worth, he says, the daylight version of you, the real one, the one with the flour on his hands and the bakery he built and the 3 boys he raised alone, that version is not less than anything. It is not something I would have needed a way out of. He says this quietly and precisely, the way he says things he means completely. I want you to know that. Felix looks at his hands on the table. He looks at them for a long time. Thank you, he says, 2 words. The same 2 words he left on a notepad on a hotel pillow 6 years ago, but carrying an entirely different weight now, not an exit, not an apology. Just the honest, direct expression of a man receiving something he needed to hear. Theo stands. He straightens his coat. He reaches into his wallet and sets 2 20s on the table for a coffee that cost $4. Saturday, he says. Saturday, Felix says. Theo walks to the door. The bell rings. He is gone. Renata appears at Felix's shoulder with a fresh Americano. She sets it on the table in front of him. She says nothing. She goes back to the counter. Felix picks up the cup he drinks. Outside the window, Chicago moves through a Friday morning with total indifference to the fact that something just shifted, quietly and completely, in a corner table of a bakery on North Halsted Street. The city does not know. The morning does not care. And Felix Carter sits with his coffee, and the specific, unfamiliar sensation of a weight that has been carried so long he forgot it was there, beginning, finally, to lift. Saturday comes in cold. Felix is at the bakery by 5:15, which is the same time he is always there, except that this morning he takes stock of the display case twice and wipes down the counter 3 times, and rearranges the mismatched ceramic mugs on the shelf above the espresso machine before he catches himself and stops. His mother, Vivienne Carter, arrives at 7:45 with all 3 boys. She does not come inside immediately. Through the front window, Felix watches her crouch down to the boys' level on the sidewalk, saying something that involves pointing at the bakery door and what appears to be a very short, very firm set of instructions. Caleb nods with his whole body. Marcus looks at the door with his quiet, measuring expression. Luca is already looking through the window, and when his eyes find Felix, he raises one hand in a short, precise wave. Felix waves back. Vivienne straightens up. She opens the door. She sends all 3 boys through it and does not come in herself. Felix meets her eyes through the glass, and she holds his gaze for one long, searching beat and then nods, just once, just slightly, and turns and walks away down the sidewalk. His mother is a woman of minimal words and maximum weight. The boys move through the bakery door with their individual energies fully intact. Caleb immediately goes for the display case with the open, optimistic hunger of a child who has not eaten in at least 45 minutes and considers this a crisis. Marcus comes to stand at Felix's side behind the counter and surveys the room with the expression of a small general assessing a field. Luca takes off his jacket, folds it with alarming neatness, and places it on the shelf under the register. He's coming today, Luca says. Not a question. Felix looks at him. Yeah, Luca nods. He picks up the small hand broom behind the counter and begins to sweep a section of floor that is already clean. Felix watches him for a moment and then decides not to say anything about it. At 8:58, the bell above the door rings. All 3 boys look up. Theo North comes through the door without his phone in his hand, without his charcoal coat, in a dark blue jacket, and the kind of clean, unhurried posture of a man who has decided, ahead of time, what kind of morning this is going to be. He stops just inside the door. He looks at Felix first, and Felix gives him a short nod, and then Theo looks at the counter, at Luca, who is looking back at him with absolute stillness, and Marcus, who is doing what Marcus always does, standing at Felix's side, saying nothing, measuring, and Caleb, who has a Pano chocolate in one hand and is looking at Theo with the candid, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who encounters the world as a series of interesting things. Hi, Caleb says, around a mouthful of pastry. Theo's face does something that is not a controlled expression. It is faster and warmer than anything Felix has seen on Theo's face before, something that rises before he can decide to allow it. Hi, Theo says. Caleb swallows. Are you the man from Tuesday? With their eyes, Theo glances at Felix. They talk to each other, Felix says. Extensively. Theo looks back at Caleb. Yeah, he says. I'm the man from Tuesday. Caleb considers this. Luca said your eyes look like ours. I said they probably just look like someone's eyes. He looks at Theo with frank assessment. But they do look like ours. Theo crouches down to Caleb's level, right there at the front of the bakery, without hesitating, without calculating whether it is the right move. He just does it, goes down to a child's height because it is the right height to speak to a child from, and he looks at Caleb with the same directness he carries at full height. Can I ask your name? He says. Caleb Dorian Carter, Caleb says. I'm the middle one. Well, I'm middle by 4 minutes because Marcus is the youngest and Luke is the oldest, but we're all technically the same age until March because that's when Luca says the numbers actually change. He pauses for breath. What's your name? Theo. Theo says. Do you like chocolate croissants? Caleb asks. Because my dad makes them, and they're really good, and the ones in the case right now are fresh, which is important because yesterday's ones are still good, but today's are better. Take one, Theo says. Caleb turns and points at Felix. Dad, he wants a chocolate croissant. Felix is looking at this scene from behind the counter with his arms at his sides, and his hands very still because he does not entirely trust what his face is doing, and he needs to direct its attention to the task. He plates the croissant. He sets it on the counter. Marcus has not moved from Felix's side. He is looking at Theo with the expression he has used since infancy to evaluate new information. Not hostile, not warm, simply thorough. Theo stands up from Caleb's level. He takes the croissant from the counter. He looks at Marcus. Marcus, Theo says, not a question. He has filed the names. Marcus looks at him. Yeah, Marcus says. Your dad tells me you're pretty good in a tough spot, Theo says. Marcus holds his gaze. I just stand there. Sometimes that's enough, Theo says. Marcus looks at him for 3 more seconds. He looks at Felix. He looks back at Theo. Okay, Marcus says, which for Marcus is a significant endorsement. Luca has set down the hand broom. He is standing at the far end of the counter, watching all of this with the composed, gathering attention of someone deciding what they think about something before they say it. He watches Theo with Caleb. He watches Theo with Marcus. He waits. Theo takes a bite of the croissant. He looks at Felix. You made this, he says. I make everything here, Felix says. Theo takes another bite. He is quiet for a moment. You should be charging more, he says. Felix almost smiles. He catches himself. He turns back to the machine. The morning unfolds the way Saturday mornings do, slow and warm, and with the good smell of the room filling out as the crowd fills in. Theo does not leave. He does not sit apart. He stays at the counter, on a stool that Renata produces without being asked, and he exists in the room the way he has never existed in this room before, not as the man who orders and leaves, not as the variable that gets managed, but as someone inside the day. Caleb talks to him for 40 minutes with the relentless, generous energy of a child who has decided someone is interesting and intends to fully exhaust the subject. Theo answers every question about his work, about whether he has ever been to space, about why adults don't like sugar, about what his apartment looks like, about whether he knows how to skateboard, about what his favorite color is, with patient, direct answers that treat each question as the genuine inquiry it is. Marcus migrates toward him by degrees, first to the near end of the counter, then onto the stool beside Theo. He does not initiate conversation. He listens to Caleb's interview with focused attention, and occasionally, when Theo answers something with particular accuracy, he nods once like a small judge confirming a ruling. Luca waits until 11:15, then he walks to the stool on Theo's other side and climbs up onto it. He sits. He looks at Theo. Theo looks back at him. Have a question, Luca says. Okay, Theo says. Did you know about us? Luca asks. The bakery goes on around them. Renata is at the register. Caleb has migrated to the kitchen in search of a second croissant. Marcus is still. Theo looks at Luca for a long moment. He does not flinch away from the question, and he does not manufacture an answer. He looks at a 5-year-old who deserves a real one, and he gives it to him. No, Theo says. I didn't. Luca absorbs this. Are you going to be here now? Theo looks at Felix. Felix is looking back at him from across the counter. His hands are on the marble surface, and his face is entirely open, not managed, not composed, not behind anything, just present. Yes, Theo says. He says it to Luca. He says it so that Felix can hear it too. I'm going to be here. Luca nods. He picks up one of the stir sticks from the small ceramic cup by the register. He lines it up parallel to the edge of the counter. Straight, even. Okay, Luca says. 3 weeks later, Theo is at Franklin Elementary for the fall exhibition. It is a school event. Crayon drawings on construction paper. A science poster about whether that Marcus made with the systematic precision of someone who has never once been satisfied with approximate placement. A story Caleb wrote about a dragon who owns a bakery, in which the dragon's name is Felix. The croissants are magical, and the twist is that all the customers are also dragons, which Caleb clearly considers a reasonable and satisfying resolution. And a mathematics display that is technically a class project, but that Luca has organized so thoroughly into categories and subcategories that the teacher has simply put his name on it and stepped back. Felix stands beside Theo in the gymnasium of Franklin Elementary School and watches his sons move through the room with the specific, collective confidence of 3 people who have always had each other and have now, for the first time, brought someone new into the formation. Theo is not performing. That is the thing Felix keeps coming back to across these 3 weeks, the complete and total absence of performance in how Theo shows up. He does not arrive with gifts designed to purchase goodwill. He does not talk to the boys in the careful, slightly elevated register of an adult who is trying to be liked. He shows up. He pays attention. He is present in the room in the same direct, unhurried way that he has been present in every room Felix has ever seen him in, except that now the room is Felix's life instead of Felix's bakery, and the distinction is not small. He had showed up at the bakery 3 mornings in the following week. Not every morning, Theo was not the kind of man to flood a space he had just been given access to. He came Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. He ordered the Americano. He stayed longer than the order required. On Thursday he had fixed the leg of the corner table without being asked, had gone to the supply closet in the back that Felix had never mentioned and found a screwdriver that he also had never mentioned, and tightened the loose bolt that had been making the table rock for 6 weeks. Felix had noticed this after the fact, and had not said anything about it, and had thought about it, on and off, for the rest of the week. He comes to the first playground pickup on a Wednesday, 2 weeks in. He stands with Felix outside the school gate at 3:15 and watches the kids pour out through the doors. And when Marcus appears and stops on the steps and sees Theo standing there with Felix, something in Marcus's expression shifts, not dramatically, not with any visible display, but something loosens just slightly behind his eyes. He walks toward them. He reaches the gate. He looks at Theo. Early, Marcus says. First time, Theo says. Dad's always early, Marcus says. But he leaves work to do it. I left work, Theo says. Marcus looks at him with that long, thorough assessment. Okay, he says. He falls into step on Theo's left side, the way he falls into step on Felix's right, as if he has been doing it for years. As if there is a space there that was always his and he is simply returning to it. Felix watches this from 2 feet away and says absolutely nothing and keeps his face in order with the full force of his considerable practice. The fall exhibition is different. It is public and it is mixed, and it is full of other parents and other children, and the specific social architecture of an elementary school event, and Theo moves through it without any of the awkward, overcautious energy of someone who is uncertain whether they belong in a room. He looks at Marcus's weather poster for 4 full minutes and asks 3 questions about barometric pressure, about the difference between cumulus and cumulonimbus, about the data source Marcus used for the rainfall statistics, that Marcus answers with increasing precision and something that is not quite a smile, but is doing its best impression of one. He reads Caleb's dragon story. All of it. Standing at the small display table while Caleb watches him from 3 feet away with barely contained anticipation. Dragon's name is Felix, Theo says when he is done, because he owns a bakery, Caleb says. The real Felix know about this, Caleb grins. He helped me spell croissant. Theo looks at Felix. Felix raises both hands in a small, clear statement of non-involvement. Twist is good, Theo tells Caleb. I didn't see it coming. Caleb's face goes fully alight. He grabs Theo's sleeve with both hands and starts explaining the entire internal logic of the dragon bakery world, and the specific rules that govern why all the customers are also dragons. And Theo leans in and listens like this is the most important information he has received all month. Felix watches this from across the gymnasium. He watches Theo with his boys, and he thinks about a choice he made at 22 years old on the edge of a bathtub in December, and he thinks about the 6 years between that morning and this one, and he thinks about all the ways fear shapes a life, quietly, incrementally, through the reasonable, everyday decisions of a person who is just trying not to be hurt. He thinks about all the Saturdays and the school mornings and the bedtime stories and the sick days and the fall exhibitions he attended alone, with his mother beside him, building the thing he built. He does not regret building it. He does not regret a single morning of it, but he sees Theo crouched at Caleb's table with his sleeve held by a small, pastry-stained hand, and he feels the specific, gentle ache of time that was spent when it didn't have to be. Not lost. Just spent without the full picture available. And he is finished being angry at himself for that because what his framework says, the one he built at 22 out of fear and necessity, was the best available structure for who he was at the time. He is not 22 anymore. Luca appears at Felix's shoulder. He's good with Caleb, Luca says, looking across the gymnasium. He is, Felix says. Luca is quiet for a moment. Are you going to stop being scared of him? He asks. Felix looks down at his son. When did I say I was scared? He says. You didn't, Luca says. You just look like you do when you're about to do something that matters. Felix looks at his 5-year-old son. He looks at those eyes, Theo's eyes in Luca's face, and 5 years of Felix's life behind them. Yeah, Felix says. I'm going to stop. Luca nods. He straightens the collar of his own jacket with both hands neat and precise. Good, he says. He walks back toward Marcus's weather poster, and Felix stands in the gymnasium of Franklin Elementary School on a Wednesday evening in October and watches the 3 people he built his entire life around, moving through a room with a 4th person who showed up finally and is staying. He watches it and he breathes, and for the first time in 6 years he lets himself feel the full weight of what is being built. Not the fear of it, not the cost of it, not the managed, careful version. The whole thing, the real thing, the version of the story that is still being written. On a Sunday morning in November, Felix is alone in the bakery kitchen at 6 a.m. When he hears the knock, he knows who it is. He knows because Theo is the only person in his life who knocks at a side door instead of the front, and because Theo has never once arrived unannounced before, and the fact that he is here before 7 on a Sunday means something has shifted. Felix opens the door. Theo is standing on the back step in the early cold with 2 cups of coffee from the place 2 blocks over that Felix secretly considers a competitor and publicly has no opinion about. He holds 1 cup out toward Felix without saying anything. Felix takes it. They stand for a moment in the open doorway between the warm kitchen and the cold morning. Come in, Felix says. Theo comes in. He looks at the kitchen, the commercial mixer running a slow early batch, the proofing trays lined up along the back wall, the butcher block center island with its scattered flour and the bowl of cardamom and the small, precise arrangement of tools that is Felix's working language. He takes in the room the way he takes in all rooms, quietly, completely, building the picture. Marcus called me, Theo says. Felix looks at him. Last night, Theo says. He called from your phone. I think he took it off the counter while you were in the other room. Felix sets his coffee cup down on the island. What did he say? He said. Theo starts, and then he pauses for a moment like he is making sure he gets it exactly right. He said, "This is Marcus. I just wanted to ask if you were coming back. Because Luca says you are, but Caleb is not sure, and I want to know so I can tell Caleb and he will stop asking." Theo looks at Felix. And then he said thank you and hung up. Felix stands very still. He thinks about Marcus, the quietest of the three, the one who says the least and means the most, the one who stands in a schoolyard without speaking and makes bigger things move simply through the force of his presence. He thinks about an 8-year-old in pajamas taking a phone off a counter and making a call that none of the adults in the situation had been brave enough to initiate. "What did you say?" Felix asks. "He hung up before I could answer," Theo says. Felix exhales. "So I'm here," Theo says, "to answer the question." They stand across the center island from each other. The mixer is running. The kitchen smells like cardamom and brown butter, and the specific early warmth of a room where something is always being made. Outside the window, Chicago is a city before its day has started, grey and quiet, and enormous and possible. Theo sets his coffee cup down on the island across from Felix's. He looks at Felix across the butcher block and the scattered flour, and the 6 years, and everything that was said at the corner table, and everything that has happened in the 3 weeks since. "I know I can't make up time," Theo says. "I know that's not how any of this works, and I'm not going to pretend it is. What I did in the parking garage on West Monroe that Tuesday, sitting there for 40 minutes, I wasn't calculating. I wasn't figuring out an angle. I was sitting with the specific experience of realizing I had 3 sons I didn't know, and a man I had carried in the back of my mind for 6 years who had been standing in front of me every morning for 18 months, and what I was sitting with was not logistics." He pauses. "It was grief for the time that went. And then it was not grief anymore, because I came out of that parking garage and I thought, it went, it's gone. What is here right now is 5-year-olds in a bakery and a man who built something real and a door that is open, and I walked through it." Felix looks at him. "Know what I want," Theo says. "I know clearly. I want to be at the fall exhibitions and the school pickups and the Saturday mornings and the Sunday nights when someone can't sleep. I want to be in the room for the ordinary things, not just the significant ones. I want my boys to know me, and I want you to be able to stop managing the distance between us." His voice is level and direct, and carries the specific weight of a man, saying something he has carried long enough to know exactly what it means. "I know that's not a small thing to ask for. I know it requires something from you that I haven't earned yet, and I'm asking you to extend before I have. And I am asking anyway, because you deserve someone who asks directly instead of waiting for a moment that feels safe." Kitchen is very quiet. The mixer turns. The city sits outside the window in its early grey. Felix looks at Theo across the island and he feels all at once the full breadth of what he has been holding, not as a burden, not as a wound, but as a thing he kept because it was worth keeping. 6 years of mornings, 3 boys with their father's eyes. A bakery that seats 32. A thank you note on a hotel notepad that was an exit and a beginning at the same time, except he had only been able to see one of those things from where he was standing. He picks up his coffee cup. He walks around the center island. He stops in front of Theo, close enough that the space between them has gone from the professional distance of a bakery counter to the real distance of 2 people in the same life, and he looks at him directly, fully, without managing any of it. "You terrified me," Felix says. "Not you specifically, the idea of you, the version of you that might have looked at the real version of me and found it less than what you had in the dark." He pauses. "I spent 6 years making sure I was enough without you. I need you to know that, not as an accusation, as a fact. I am enough without you. My boys are whole without you. The life I built is real and it is mine, and I am not asking you to complete anything." Theo holds his gaze. "What I am saying," Felix continues, "is that a whole life and a fuller one are not the same thing, and I am done being afraid of the fuller one." He holds out his hand. Theo looks at it for one moment, not hesitating, just receiving it, the way you receive something with your full attention because it deserves nothing less. He takes it, not a handshake, not a gesture. Just 2 hands on a Sunday morning in a kitchen above the flour and the cardamom and the specific, ordinary warmth of a room where something is always being made, holding the weight of a thing that has finally been said out loud by both people at the same time. They stand there for a moment that has no particular length, except that it is exactly long enough. Outside, the city starts its Sunday. A delivery truck on the cross street. A dog and its owner moving past the back window. The early light coming up behind the buildings in that slow, certain way that does not ask permission and does not wait. Inside the bakery, Felix, Carter and Theo North stand in the kitchen at 6 a.m., holding a beginning that is also, in every important way, a continuation. A thing that started on a terrace above a cold city 6 years ago, and moved through a pregnancy test and a notepad and a baby shower attended by Felix's mother and 3 infants in a 1-bedroom apartment and a commercial lease and a display case and 43 Americanos and a boy who said your eyes are like mine and is still going, still moving forward, not despite everything, through it. Luca will take the stir sticks out of the ceramic cup on Monday and line them up at exact angles, and Theo will watch him do it and understand, finally, where that comes from. Marcus will stand at Theo's left side with his quiet, anchoring weight, and Theo will learn in time that this is the most complete trust Marcus knows how to offer. Caleb will tell Theo 17 more things about the internal logic of the Dragon Bakery world, because there are 17 more things, and he has been waiting for a sufficiently interested audience. And Felix Carter will make espresso behind the counter of his bakery that seats 32, and the flour will be on his hands, and the bell above the door will ring, and he will look up, not with the braced for impact stillness of a man who has been protecting himself, but with the easy, open attention of a man who has stopped needing to, and that will be enough. That will be more than enough. That will be everything. If this story sat with you, if it reached you in a place you didn't expect, please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss the next story. Every week we bring you narratives built around real emotion, real stakes, and real people finding their way through. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. And in the comments, tell me this. What was the moment in this story that hit you the hardest? Was it Luca looking up and saying, "Your eyes are like mine"? Was it Felix standing on the edge of that bathtub making a decision alone? Was it Marcus calling Theo from a phone he borrowed off a counter because the adults hadn't found the courage yet? Tell me. I read every single one. Your words in the comments are what make this community worth building. See you in the next story.